Hi, and welcome to this week's Three Legs, Four Wheels F1 podcast. It's Paul here with
Dan.
Chris.
I'm going to burp. Lee.
looking after the audience again, I see.
Yeah.
Always looking after the audience.
We are only 2 weeks away from the start of the season. This is going to be the last show for a while where we're not going to be previewing or reviewing a race.
Yeah, it is actually.
So what we're going to fill it with instead?
I don't know, just... Should we get a guest?
That's a good idea.
Does anyone know someone who might want to come on the show?
The Fish has been wanting to come on for ages.
Yeah, but he keeps blowing hot and cold.
In that case, you're not going to let me bring the Dyson on.
Oh, that sucks.
Let's just type some random stuff into Skype and see who answers.
Oh, we've got one. Well, as promised, we are here with legendary Formula One technical expert Craig Scarborough. Hi, Craig. Thanks for joining us.
I thought you got the wrong person there for a minute, saying legendary. Good evening, everyone.
You're certainly legendary on this podcast. We quote you often enough.
Yeah.
So, testing is done for the time being, and what's your opinions? That's a wide-ranging question, I know.
It is.
It's a very open question.
What's your
it's
opinions
strange.
on the testing?
Not normally through testing. I mean, there's obviously loads of sort of sub-stories, but you kind of get a feel for where everybody is in testing. And certainly because we had so little running in that first week, and everyone ended up the second week kind of on the back foot with their programs, I think this is one of the few sort of testing periods, even though it was just 8 days, but we've got very little feel for where everyone truly stands. No one really kind of did a little bit of everything. So, we know that, Merck were fast on the race sim, but we didn't really see them run on the very soft tyres. We didn't see them sort of do some quali runs, but we know they're fast. Ferrari, likewise. Their long runs, they were doing lift and coasting. Are they in trouble, or was that just something as a part of their race sim test? So it really is really vague, and we can only sort of say anything about any team. And I know we're going to get to forecasting and second guessing everyone at some stage, but it's really difficult this year because there's loads of kind of caveats that you have to attach. It's like, yeah, so and so are good, but we haven't seen this. This could be a problem, or maybe it isn't a problem. So it's been really difficult, but I think it's fair to say that maybe the sharp end may not change much, but certainly the midfielders have shaken up quite a lot through the winter. So that's normally a sign of a good season, even if we may have to suffer a little bit of domination at the front sometimes.
What's your take on this smoking business going out the back of the Ferrari? Oh, well, Ferrari-powered cars.
It's funny. It really kind of grew some traction in the media through the second week of testing. I mean, we saw it almost instantaneously at the very first day of testing, and it was one of those things that was quite easy to predict that we were going to see oil blowing out the back of the cars because of the change in regulations, where, as you may remember, everyone was talking about oil burning in the past couple of years, where they're actually trying to get oil mist back into the engine so that they can get additives into the combustion that you couldn't put in with the fuel. And Ferrari and Mercedes were the two big culprits in this area. I think Mercedes have been leading it since sort of 2014 anyway. But the change in regulations was one of the measures to try and prevent this oil burning trick. I don't think eventually it's going to be utterly successful, but they've made some steps. And you have to blow the venting of the crankcase straight out the back of the car like you used to do in the old days. And it looks like no one's even using a catch tank. They're literally just got a tube and a bit of pipe at the end.
And it burns.
Ferrari in particular, there's two things going. You've got smoke when the engine's just running, and that's coming out below the tail light. And there's lots of pictures when the car's in the pit lane, and there's when it's on the straights, you can see, some vapor coming out. Now, I don't know how much of that is specific to Ferrari. We didn't really see it with everyone else because their one comes out by the exhausts, and any vapor would obviously almost be immediately burnt off. So I wonder how much the Ferrari is just in the cold weather that we had in Valencia, because it was under the tail light and not near the hot exhaust, was just some condensation that we were seeing. It was visible on all three Ferrari engine cars, and no one seemed to, in the team or the FIA strangely, seemed to be unduly worried about this.
Yeah, because that's all exhaust fumes really are, isn't it? Essentially, it is just condensation, which is why you see more of it on cold days as well.
On cold
But
days,
it
yes.
was more definitely more prominent on the Ferrari powered cars.
Yeah.
It's just interesting what you're saying about the catch trays as well. Oil burning being a problem with the in the past few seasons, you were saying it was Red Bull that were complaining more and more about the the
Yes.
top teams being the oil burners.
Mhm.
But have we seen anything like that in any of the other cars, like for example the Renault engines or because if it was condensation, surely you'd see that in the other engines as well.
Yeah, this is again the strange thing. If we sit in Melbourne in hot temperatures, then we know there is something kind of going on with a Ferrari, whether
Right.
that's intentional or just a byproduct of a lot of oil being splashed around in the sump, which is entirely legal and is quite natural in a race engine. Because everyone else was venting it by the exhaust, we didn't see the level of kind of vapory condensation, if that's indeed what it is. So no other engine manufacturer gave us any clues. Now, there's been lots of rule changes over the winter to try and prevent oil burning, which is this pipe work that we've just been speaking about. They've changed the oil specification. They've changed the amount of oil that you can consume through a race, which is, for us with road cars, seems significant that you could actually lose 1.8 litres just in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
I bought a couple of second-hand cars over the years that were able to do that, but it really it didn't give me the performance increase that other people are. Now there is still potential, certainly in qualifying, where you could kind of burn, more than the average amount of fuel, and the rules are very woolly about how they're measuring these things. So there is the potential for teams to be able to get oil back into the combustion chamber even without this, and this is through the turbo seals. And this is where it all starts to get quite interesting. Now, anyone that's watched Formula One since 2014, when we had these new power units, may well have seen that when the Mercedes fire up, there's quite a bit of smoke come out from the garage. And sometimes on the start line and stuff, which is a bit more than you see where, sometimes they overfill the oil system. You see a bit of smoke there, which is a slightly different thing. Now, the Ferrari was quite noticeably blowing a lot of smoke on startup. And that seemed to be coming from the exhaust rather than from the breather. Now, that is a suggestion that they're following the Mercedes trick now of blowing through the oil seals in the turbo to get this oil back into the combustion chamber.
Right.
So it looks like we've still got some controversy to talk about this year. And I think Christian Horner is well on top of this and realises it's going on. I don't believe Honda or Renault are really going down this path. I mean, I think perhaps that they've got other issues to be, getting ready. They've got another aspect to be getting competitive with. I think starting to play about with oil burning is something that really is not on their agenda this stage. And what's quite interesting that you don't get as your average fan on the TV is you don't get the smell. Now, last year, the Ferraris really smelled of paraffin, something very strong in their fuel. It always made your eyes water, that classic paraffin smell.
Yeah.
And that was all, again, just all quite above board and legal. But this year, what you're noticing much more with the cars, and possibly because they're all breathing this oil out of the back of it, but you are getting a lot more of a burnt oil smell in the pit lane, which suggests that potentially, there is some of this going on. Maybe teams are changing their fuel formulations, changing how the engine's breathing and how much oil it's breathing. So, yeah, again, I think there's still a lot of mileage and a lot of controversy to come out this year as to exactly who's doing what and how they're doing it.
Well, give us something to talk about at least.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be Formula One if
It's never
people.
plain sailing, is it? With the
No.
rules?
Yeah,
We need to get an older commentator.
It's quite funny. Early last year, when I first detected this smell of the Ferrari, you honestly can detect which engine has just gone by in the pit lane purely by smell. And it's you just can't get that across to people.
No.
Have you thought maybe you've just got an exceptional sense of smell?
I really do not believe I do. But I think it's one of those things that, maybe other people smell something but just don't pick up on. Oh, is that interesting or important? While it may not be interesting, it potentially is quite important this year.
Well, it's like here during the TT, you can always smell the difference with the two-stroke bikes.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's very much like that. You know, I mean, we don't smell many two-strokes on the road. More's the pity. Certainly where I live, off the Isle of Man. But yeah, you know, there is stuff to detect in the you know, the plume of gases that are coming out of the cars. And you know, I know some people in the oil and petrol industry, and they can always kind of say, does it smell a bit like this, or is it a bit like this? And you eventually find out the sort of things that they're adding to the fuel. So it's, you know, there's a lot of technology and a lot of science going on with the fuels and the oils, you know, way beyond just this kind of sort of ridiculous oil burning thing, but just generally the blend of fuel and the additives that they've got to get into the fuel to make that all work.
Sounds like whiskey making.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if
That's,
you ever get
that's
fed,
probably the pit lane. Yeah.
yeah, if you ever get fed up of motorsports, there's a few distilleries that would probably like to speak to you.
So yeah, moving away from that though, Craig, the sort of oil burning and fuel thing as well. Do you see any major gains being made by any of the Renault powered teams or their power units in particular? And it's interesting that Honda, having switched to Toro Rosso, have suddenly found an incredible amount of reliability relative to their days with McLaren.
Yeah, I mean, I think engines, you know, will be a big part of the story through the year. And yeah, I think they've all made progress. I mean, unfortunately, when you if you start at the top, you know, Mercedes look like they've made a massive leap with their engine for this year, and it really is a concern. Although strangely, it's not being shown in their customer teams through testing. Williams had a pretty torrid time. Force India looked, you know, kind of average, surprisingly. So it's kind of hard to work out quite where they're pitched. Now there are regulations added this year that make sure that any customer team not only gets the same hardware as the factory team on the power unit, but also all of the power modes and all of the software and the bits and pieces, which I think more than anecdotally weren't provided to some of the customer teams all of the time in the past few years. So, yeah, I mean, things are looking good for Mercedes power teams, if only from reliability. You know, because we knew they were on top of things last year. They didn't even use 4 batteries and control electronics on a lot of their cars last year. So with the reduction in that for this year, things are looking great. Ferrari, it's very hard to pitch where their power unit is. I think, yeah, clearly they've made some steps forward. The packaging doesn't look to be too different. So, you know, a Ferrari should be there or thereabouts. Renault have forever hard to predict, probably more so, as it seems ridiculous to say more so than with Honda.
Yeah.
You know, they really should have a cutting-edge engine. They've been in Formula One consistently now for, I mean, I don't know how many years it is, but if you add up, you know, decades, even if it is with, you know, you know, their engine being subbed out to some other people, and they've been in this new category since the first year it came in 2014. So why haven't Renault got, you know, one of an engine that's on a par with Ferrari and Mercedes?
Well, I think they had the World Championship, didn't they, for the 4 years before this new sort of hybrid era. So it's strange that Renault have not really adapted to the.
It is, but if you even remember sort of through those years, now the Renault engine wasn't the most powerful. It wasn't the best engine in lots of respects. It was very good on fuel economy, and obviously they got this exhaust blown diffuser mapping that's worked out really well. But that was kind of in spite of the engine rather than, you know, it being purely just a great race engine. So Renault, you know, seemed to forever be on the back foot. You have to guess that they've made some progress this year. Red Bull, they were kind of getting their excuses in early around, yeah, we've got a great chassis, and I think they do. But they were kind of getting excuses into Renault quite early, aren't they? But, you know, we're going to be suffering with reliability, with the lack of power because of Renault, blah, 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 blah. Christian Horner doing his kind of lobbying. And, you know, this is the last year of the Red Bull Renault relationship, and I think it could get quite catty quite quickly through the year. You know, a single power unit failure at any level, I think, will just kick off the Red Bull kind of hype machine about, you know, how unfair this whole thing is.
Drama in Formula One, surely not.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's all politics and lobbying, isn't it? But yeah, so. You know, when you look at the Renault powered teams, Red Bull clearly, you know, very good. Are they going to be as quick as Mercedes? Are they going to be quicker than Ferrari? I think on their day they will be. So they're looking very strong. But again, I think that's much more down to the chassis. The Renault factory team, equally looking very, very good. I mean, they could be the best of the rest this year. They really came on strong through the sort of the last half of last year. I think they found some gains with their aerodynamics quite early in the year. And I think by the time we got to the last third of the season, they were kind of knocking on Red Bull's door on performance terms, a few races. So I think Renault as a factory team are a team to look out for. And then we come to McLaren, don't we?
Yeah, go on. Hit us hard with it.
Yes.
Just to fill you in, there's always been a kind of McLaren bias on this show for some reason.
Yeah, I'm a constant McLaren apologist.
So, okay, I mean, let's try and put without sort of being sarcastic, which is also easy with sort of McLaren and the Honda years that we've just had. If you kind of look into the problems that they were having teething problems. So, apart from perhaps the wheel falling off, that was a McLaren problem, but the teething problems they had around the back of the car, some oil leaks, some burning, and then a turbo failing on the car that had the oil leak, or the engine that had the oil leak. So that's very much teething problems, and the layout of the Renault engine is very different to the layout of the Honda engine, particularly because they've got all of the turbocharger in the gearbox inside the carbon fibre casing. And then you've got the exhaust, and there's a different vibration signature you get from different engines and different heat signatures and different pockets of heat, as Eric Boulier was saying. So while they had a pretty awful test, I don't think that's indicative that by the time we get to Melbourne, or by the time they've got their, Pucker 2018 aero kit on that car, that these problems will continue. So I'm not saying that they won't or will, but they shouldn't continue. It's all stuff that can be solved because it's a change. We saw that McLaren was quick. We saw it did long runs. We saw it did short runs. So McLaren are looking kind of like they're going to take a step ahead. Until we see their real aero package, it's very hard to kind of gauge the potential. But McLaren look like they're not going to have a bad start to the season, but they're not flying. They're a little bit underprepared, a little bit underdeveloped. So but we know how quick McLaren can catch up.
So don't look for them at the start. Look. Oh, hang on.
If they've got a half decent start to the year, that bodes really well by the time we come to the season ends, which is tends to be when McLaren are really on form by the time they've kind of fixed all the issues with the car. So if they've got a half decent start, that means by mid-season McLaren should be coming on strong.
I can't help but feel that if McLaren were in any real trouble, Alonso would have told us all by now.
Yeah, he's quite good at that.
I think there was a mix of honest opinion and a mix of PR sort of spin going on, but I didn't get the impression that it was a disastrous test as we've had over recent years with the Honda package. I think they can see that these are quite superficial failures, not real sort of, they are sort of race stoppers at this stage, but I think they're nothing that couldn't be solved with another week like they have now back at the factory to draw up and design some new parts and rectify all those issues. So I think we can hope that what we saw there was teething problems and nothing deeper with the packaging going on there. And then we come to Honda. An absolute revelation, weren't they?
Yeah, now, where's all this reliability come from all of a sudden? Is this to do with the way, or is some of it to do with the way that Toro Rosso are working with them being a complete turnaround from the way that McLaren worked with them?
There's kind of two answers to that. I don't think the reliability at this stage is because of the way that the two partners are working together. Because I think it's way too early in that partnership, and reliability comes over a long period, and obviously Toro Rosso haven't had that yet. However, that's not to say that I think we can see that Toro Rosso, and more importantly, look into the future, is Red Bull Technologies, which is the engineering business that sits above Red Bull Racing and Toro Rosso, are tackling this in very much the right way. The talk from the team, they've all had sort of cultural training, language training. They've, looked at how they're going to communicate and work with Honda, and that's all the really good stuff. And we know that Toro Rosso have got access to Red Bull's facilities, which includes their full car dyno, which is this kind of magic device where you strap a complete car on engine and gearbox, and it not only sort of gets the engine and the gearbox running, but puts the loads in that a 7-post rig would put into the suspension, and you can get to putting some of the aero load into the car and really test the complete car off the track. And McLaren had never invested in one of these, and still now they don't feel they need to invest in one going forwards, even with the 2021 regs coming. That's going to require this sort of, complete car testing in the run-up. So, Toro Rosso are looking really good. I think Honda maybe have turned a leaf. I think the question remains is, what exactly was in the back of that Toro Rosso through testing? Now, I know for a fact in the first week they ran one engine, and then they made a planned change midweek during that test. I think they started the second test with another engine and again had a planned change of engine. So they've only used 3 engines, which is still well below their sort of maximum life that you would expect given the mileage, significant mileage in fairness, that Toro Rosso did. That wasn't, the kind of 2/3 of the season of mileage on those engines. But what was important is that they weren't changing these engines as a reaction to something failing. And it looks that, Honda's weakest link has always been the MGU-H, which is the hybrid system that's attached to the turbocharger. And is very much, under these current rules, one of the most difficult bits of technology to get working. And again, Renault had issues with it and the turbo last year. So that's worked. How much did they have that engine turned up? What spec of turbo engine? Was it very much a finalised 2017 spec, or was that maybe a big redesign 28? It's very hard to gauge, and I'm getting different messages from different people that you speak to. But I think we saw some pace in the Toro Rosso. So we know it's got power. We know it's up there or thereabouts with straight line speed. They did quite a range of testing from short runs to the racing. So Toro Rosso and Honda are kind of looking quite good. The question will be is as they get into the nitty-gritty of the season, put mileage on the car, turn everything up for qualifying, and then start to introduce some new parts. Is that where it's going to start to fall apart now? Years with McLaren that we've just gone by, they had a bad start to the season, and then when they brought new stuff, that was bad as well. So have Honda fixed all of their issues through their entire life cycle of the engines during the season, or have they just fixed this upfront one where they start the year with a solid start, but introduce failures further through? That's only time can tell, but I think it's looking quite good for them, isn't it?
It is, to be honest. It's
Possibly. I wonder if maybe Toro Rosso haven't exactly got an engine. It's just that Red Bull have got an incredible amount of track testing time now.
I mean, I think, yeah.
Is that a bit too conspiracy theorist?
I think, this is clearly, if we use the word Red Bull as a Red Bull technology, not as in Red Bull racing, but, we know that it's being looked at on high. And, they've got, they don't need Toro Rosso as a chassis to get loads of mileage, but Honda need to get lots of mileage. So, I don't think necessarily that kind of conspiracy there, but, I think that they've gone out of their way to at least one thing right that had been so wrong for McLaren in those past 3 seasons.
I mean, it's certainly going to be interesting when you look at Honda, because you were talking about them bringing upgrades in for the last few seasons. Obviously, it's one less of each component now for this year. That's going to that's really going to put the pressure on.
Some of them, yes. It's a big. Anyone that has, well, let's put it this way: if someone loses a complete engine from either a massive blow up or potentially a huge crash, they're kind of ruined, really, because they would have to accept a start from the back of the grid. Individual failures are kind of all right, but some of these, some of the failures you get in these engines do end up damaging more than one bit and piece. So if the MGU-H goes, it tends to take the turbo and vice versa. and that is immediately a 15 grid position drop. Sorry. So if you have that go, why don't you just put a completely new power unit in, with the V6 and the MGUK and the batteries and the control electronics, start from the back of the grid and just, have fresh everything. So, yeah, I mean, I think reliability is going to be a big factor in how the season plays out. And I think we're going to have a lot of kind of weeping and wailing from people as they have these kind of one-off failures and, how they react to it. Or if someone does have a perennially unreliable package, are they going to start to do this odd thing where they swap out the complete power unit rather than just swap out components?
Also, I mean, it's something that we've not thought about this, but one of our listeners, Jeff Sharp, pointed it out on Twitter. It kind of narrows down the scope for upgrades as well from the engine manufacturers.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you pretty much only get 2 shots at a new component for the V6 engine, for the turbo, and for the MGUH that's attached to the turbo. You only get 2 batteries for the season. You only get 2 MGUKs, which is like the old KERS hybrid unit, and only 2 sets of the power electronics that switch the power from the battery to these motor generator units. So, yeah, I mean, you really don't have a lot of scope to bring upgrades. So, the first ones are going to come quite early. I imagine a lot of people probably have a new power unit earmarked for Canada, maybe giving it a run in Monaco. And then again, probably, as by the time we get to Monza, everyone will want to run a power unit. But those power units have still got a lot of mileage to do by the time we leave Europe for the end of the flywheel races.
I can't help but feel like qualifying is going to get awful complicated towards the end of the year.
Everyone gets a 15-place grid penalty. Actually, no. If everyone gets the penalty, then it's a level playing field, and it'll be less complicated.
Well, I think we can be pretty sure that there'll be a few silver-painted cars towards the front that aren't going to get many grid penalties, or potentially. But again, you hear lots of rumours through testing and pre-season, and one of the most strange ones that I had as a tip-off is that McLaren and Mercedes are worried about reliability.
Wow.
Which is not what you would expect.
Well, in the past couple of years, we've seen them just going out and banging out mile after mile after mile in testing, and they didn't do that this year.
They didn't. I mean, it's true enough that they didn't do huge mileages this year, but equally, I mean, on the first day of testing, they went out and they were straight away into like a 10-lap run. And I think we did see a couple of Mercedes power cars come back on trailers. I never really got to the bottom of exactly what the failures were on any of those cars. I don't think any of them were any obvious big power unit failures. But again, I mean, that could be the Achilles heel of any team this year. If if they go to, I don't know, what's one of the first sort of races, somewhere weird like Azerbaijan, I think is one of the early races this year.
Yeah.
If they each driver buzzes an engine, that suddenly that could really put them on the back foot, it could compromise their season. It could show us that there is maybe a fault somewhere in the Mercedes package. And obviously, once you've changed that engine for a new for another one, which would typically be at a race weekend for the same specification because they bring spares, then all of a sudden that's cut down, as you say, their real opportunity to bring a spec upgrade.
Yeah, that gets more complicated as well, doesn't it?
Without taking another grid penalty. I think teams like Mercedes potentially could, they can kind of fight through the pack at certain circuits and win back positions and points. But when you've got Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes are all going to be at each other's throats throughout the year, even if it is Mercedes is the favourite each weekend. There's no scope for giving away points this year if you want to win the championship and get that secure. So yeah, I mean it's going to be tricky. I think the good thing with the qualifying this year is that the grid penalty system has been simplified, and we won't have people. TV commentators making this ridiculous joke about 100 place grid penalty. They're going to be starting back in somewhere, and it's like, let's try and treat this seriously. There's a reason why they put these rules in, and not be flippant about it. But
Does
I
it
think
not overcomplicate it though, Craig? With because they've got such a busy season this year as well, and you got back to back races, and then right in the middle of the season, the summer break is a little bit shorter than it has been in the past. It's just 3 more than 4 weeks. So with 21 races, you're looking at giving more races, more travelling, and less components. So is logistically that's going to be a nightmare for teams as well, surely.
I think logistically, maybe not so much, unless you did have, a kind of a real catastrophic weekend. But these teams, I mean, they're so well prepared for everything that goes on. I mean, we don't see half of their preparations, but you ever notice whenever it's a wet race, they've all got gazebos with them that they can bring onto the grid. If it's cold, they've all suddenly pull out winter jackets. They prepare for every eventuality. So I think logistics maybe not, unless someone is starting to have a run of problems. Obviously, when they think they've only got to make potentially 3 power units for each driver, then that their production side of the engine manufacturers will be downscaled. They won't be producing quite as many power units. But if you do have a run on, a turbo failing, a V6 failing, then that could actually then start to catch out the factories back in Viri and Japan and Wixworth and Maranello. So, I don't think it's the necessarily race-by-race logistics, but potentially, a run on any component could have a pretty huge impact on the manufacturing for the teams.
Although logistics-wise, Haas did say that they were more in favour of the test in Barcelona than Bahrain, because it was quicker to get the replacement parts from the UK overnight.
Yeah, I mean, again, this was very much the sort of the conversation everyone was having. We all sort of sat there in the snow and the rain and the snow and the rain and the cold weather and then a bit of sunshine. And so, is a Middle Eastern test a better thing to go and do? And a lot of the teams, because again, we don't tend to see this, but, when you're in the paddock, you're always seeing, vans arriving with these huge boxes in them. And parts are shipped out, every night. They're vans down, they're flown down, they're brought by people in hand baggage where it's possible. A lot of hardware is coming and going and being replaced on these cars. You simply can't do that when you've got a 6-hour flight to Bahrain or somewhere like that.
Yeah, I think it was Gene Haas that said it works out a lot cheaper for them to just to drive everything down rather than charter a flight all that way out. It's understandable. Because
I think it depends on the parts, doesn't it? I mean, they've got lots of options in ways of getting parts down to the circuit. I mean, I can remember when McLaren had their problem with their exhaust back in, what was that, 2011, 2013? And I think they literally flew a complete floor of the car, or a couple of floors down on someone's private jet. How the hell you get a floor through the door of a private jet? I don't know. It must have been a far bigger private jet than I was envisaging. Yeah, there's always ways and means with this stuff, and they're right. Just getting someone just to drive a transit or a sprinter van down from through France into Barcelona overnight isn't the most difficult job in the world. So, there are benefits, and again, even if we went to somewhere like Bahrain or Abu Dhabi or another circuit in the Middle East, you will still get differences in conditions. You might have sandstorms. It may just be cooler, or it might be just incredibly hot. And is that any more, sort of valid than, snow in Barcelona in March?
There hasn't it been like 10 years since we had like a random snowstorm in testing? I seem to remember, like when Alonso was in Renault.
Yeah, I mean, Silverstone used to give us a lot of snow. Very rarely it's classic British snow. It was kind of, a few flakes on the ground. Everyone panics. But it wasn't. I mean, we actually had what we would regard as a someone living in the UK, proper snow. It was a couple of inches. And obviously all the Swedes and the Finns were looking at us going, "What, snow?"
Yeah, don't forget we've got Sean Kelly on next week, so he'll be able to tell us the date that it snowed, how deep it was, and how long it hung around for.
Exactly. Yes. But Yeah, I mean, yeah, we used to test, almost constantly every 2 weeks at Silverstone, even through the season, but certainly pre-season. And I can remember being at tests that would start out with frost, and then it would be foggy, then it would snow, and then it would rain, and then we'd all be putting sunglasses on, and then it would rain again and fog, and you'd just get every weather through a day.
In the Isle of Man, we call that August.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, it normally did get a little bit better through the year here at Silverstone, but testing isn't all about getting the tyres up to temperature and get the tyres tested. I mean, they did a lot of that back at Abu Dhabi for was it the young driver test? I can't remember if they still called it that, but the end of year test where they got compounds.
Yeah, I think it was officially called the young driver test, although Oliver Turvey.
Rookie driver test, wasn't it?
Yeah. Rookie test, say.
Yeah.
So there's even on that. I think the second day when we had most of the rain in testing, they had programs that they can run through which gave them data and made testing relatively worthwhile. Even if it wasn't them, getting the tyres up to speed and going out and chucking in some fast laps. There's loads of other jobs through testing that the teams have to do, and they're not so weather dependent.
Yeah. Away from gathering data and sort of power units and things like that, it's always interesting for car launches from a fan's perspective. As every year you see what new things are on the cars. I mean, last year it was shark fins and sort of the sort of the hedge trimmer that was quite prominent on top of the Force India and the monkey seat and other things. Is there anything on any of the 2018 cars that you've seen either up close that's not quite spotted by the TV cameras, or something that is just really obvious that anything that's caught your eye that sort of made you go, well that's really interesting? Because the one thing I noticed, which I spotted you'd already responded to somebody else on Twitter about, was the air inlet on the Sauber, which is quite well hidden, just above the Alfa Romeo logo on the back. And I think you said it was something to cool the turbo wastegate.
Yes, on the tail fin. Yes, yeah.
You don't see things like that on other cars. But I mean, is there anything on another car that you've seen that sort of, that kind of ingenuity, which used to get quite a lot in early Formula One?
There is again, when you start to get down to quite granular level, there's quite a lot of different things going on with lots of the cars. And I think the Sauber is a great example. As you say, you've got that on the shark fin or the tail fin that they now have on the cars, a little inlet to cool the wastegate. But their side pods in themselves are hugely complex. You've got 6 inlets on the roll hoop, and then you've got 4 on the side pods, the big ones, and then a smaller half which goes down to at the side of the thing. I mean, the Sauber really is just every great idea that everyone's had in the past year of Formula One thrown at one single car. And while I always say complexity is a good thing for Formula One, complexity.
Oh,
hang on, we lost you there for a second.
Up a little bit there.
Oh, are you back? Am I back? Am I here?
You're coming and going.
Hear me? All right, hold on. How's that? Is it any better?
Not really.
Not really. You gone really, really crackly, I think.
Kraftwerk.
Yeah.
Hold on.
It's like mobile phone calls in the 90s.
Yeah, well, it's quality of Wi-Fi and Virgin broadband. How's that? Is that better?
That's better. That's better.
Is that better? Yeah, I think it's just the radar dish on top of the Wi-Fi box is obviously just turning around slightly. Go sort of step back. So, Sauber. As you say, you've got the inlet on the wastegate on the shark fin, on the tail fin that cools the wastegate. That is on lots of other cars. Sometimes it's not a duct; it's just a little hole just to let the heat escape out or some air to go in. I mean, you'll see it on the Mercedes, but again, it's strange. This time of year, everyone starts to look at the cars really closely and then suddenly realise they're seeing things that they think are new that have been on the cars, sometimes for years, which is always quite interesting about the sort of people do stare at things now at this time of year because then there's no racing to look at. As I say, equally, the side pods on the Sauber are fascinating, and I did have a sneaky look at them through the test to see what they're doing with all of these inlets. As I say, they're on the roll hoop. You've got 6 inlets. one for the engine airbox, or two for the engine airbox, two for the hybrid cooler at the back of the car, two, I think, just a sort of general cooling for the engine bay. And then the side pods themselves have the big main inlets, as you would expect, for the radiators and stuff. But then two small ones just either side of the cockpit, which are very hard to spot in lots of the low angles that you tend to get from the photographers at trackside. But they go down to cool some oil coolers, and it's that the whole package is very complicated. And lots of other stuff on the Scarborough as well. They've really got everything thrown at it. Then, you kind of go up, you see someone like Force India that have got mirrors held on with three separate vanes. Obviously not for structural reasons. A mirror must only weigh a few hundred grams, but the aerodynamic benefits of strapping extra bits of fin on are much greater. And, every car has got something kind of going on. I think the big thing that we've seen through the launches has been how everyone's changed their side pods. And again, everyone's got a slightly different take. You hear lots of people talking about, Williams or Haas or someone have gone to Ferrari-style side pods, but no one's really copied the Ferrari concept wholesale. But they've changed the way that the front of the side pod's laid out with this very high inlet. Then you have that crash structure just below it, and then this big undercut, which is doing all the good work of that changing concept. So lots of people have done that, and I think probably a lot of people would have done it last year, but it's just one of those changes that you can't justify during a season to put on the car, because it is a big structural change, and although it does give you quite big aero benefits. And then we see someone like Mercedes that have kind of kept true to a lot of their existing sort of concepts and philosophies around the car, and their side pods. A lot of people have spoken about them, but when you kind of look at it, it's a slightly trick of the eye, because the front of the side pods, which is kind of nearer the cockpit, are very, very wide. They go out much wider. They did last year as well, went out much wider than anybody else's. Most other people almost kept their side pods the same width as in 2016, when the regulations kind of limited the width of them. But Mercedes have gone out much wider and then brought it in much tighter at the back. And it looks like it's much tighter, but if you compare it with the Ferrari or the Red Bull, I think the amount of volume they've got there is about the same. They've just put it in a different shape. And likewise, when you look at the Red Bull, their whole side pod's rear engine cover, I think some described it as a limpet shape or a clamshell shape. Yeah. It's literally jelly molded, so it's widest at the bottom and then just gets narrower and narrower. And again, because you haven't got that bulk of the hot air outlets in the Coke bottle area high up, visually it makes it look like it's much slimmer. And in some areas it is, but it's a visual thing. And I don't think anyone has really kind of stolen a march on anyone else in side pod design this year. I think they're just all lots of good ways of tackling the same problem in different ways. Now we come to sort of start of the season, that area won't change much. All the work this year is going to be on barge boards and on front wing development, and that's all I'll be wishing on about. That's all I'll be drawing for everybody all year, is just variations on how many times can you cut a barge board into a dozen sharp knife edges with extra fins added and extra slots added, and it's just gonna they're gonna get really mad this year, really gonna make the most of the space that they've got in front of the car. And you guys were at the Mercedes launch, you must have noticed that. Was it Bottas or Hamilton that drove it in? I can't remember.
It was Bottas.
Yeah,
it was Bottas, wasn't it? Yeah. Throughout last year, Hamilton needed a step to get into the car. And this isn't a halo thing. This is just to clear all of the barge boards by the side pods. And I think lots of the drivers, you'll see them struggling to get in the cars this year, not because of the halo, although that does make getting in and out sometimes a little bit more tricky, but it does have some benefits too. In terms of it gives you something to grab hold of. But there's just going to be so much aero rubbish at the side of the cars that the drivers are going to have to kind of leap into them.
I saw the little step ladder for Bottas. I thought it might have been because they didn't want any just accidental fallouts of the car.
No. I mean, Hamilton had. I mean, I'm surprised they've not designed a custom-made carbon fibre fits around all of the aero bits.
McLaren will have one.
Well, yeah, I think that hopefully as I get to some races through the year, maybe I can have a stepwatch. See what level of technology the teams are applying to the steps to allow the drivers to get into the car.
Yeah, after seeing the McLaren carbon fibre chair spacer on the first part of that Amazon documentary, I think anything's possible with them.
Yeah. I mean, the level of engineering on these cars, it's I buy lots of bits and pieces of Formula One cars, quite recent cars, which is quite good. And when you see the level of complexity they will add to a bracket that holds on a sensor, which if we were building, a kit car or a lower level race car, it would just be a bit of metal bent. But this is, a 10 centimetre square block of aluminium, and it's been milled down to the world's most finest bracket. It's absolutely incredible. And yeah, they will put huge amounts of effort into the tiniest thing on these cars. It's quite incredible, the engineering. Again, all of the stuff in the garage, everything is designed for the car. So yeah, we should have these carbon fibre steps. I think I might patent the idea and then charge the teams in using it.
It'll be known as the Scarbs step. Yeah. You watch, you'll hear it on the TV, the Scarbs step. Yeah.
Right, we've got it on the podcast. What's the date? You mentioned the Halo. Do you think we're going to see teams trying to gain more of an aerodynamic advantage with the design of that, or is it going to be too, what's the word I'm looking for? Rigid and restricted? Or do you think we'll see developments in it during the season?
I think that it will sort of flatten out probably after the Spanish Grand Prix. Lots of people have got the same idea in terms of having those boomerang wings around the top, and top itself has got a little one underneath. I think what we're actually finding is when you're speaking to the designers now is that the halo or the bodywork that you're allowed to fit to the halo is actually ending up slightly positive in terms of aerodynamics rather than being a negative thing, which really isn't what we were thinking when we first saw it and started to think about how it's going to work over the winter. So what the benefit now is that they've now got high up in front of the driver and to the side of the driver the potential to add bodywork, which they couldn't before. Now, it does have a negative effect on the roll hoop inlet, and we've seen that varied quite massively between the teams this year. And I think some of the drivers may, as we get to some of the races, start to sort of feel maybe some different buffeting and a bit of discomfort in the car from the airflow being a bit different. But again, they'll play about with the shaping. But I think the key thing will be, they will start to, find ways in the next few races just to maybe straighten up the airflow going back along the engine cover to the rear wing, and you can actually see that in some of the sort of shapes that they've added. But it's a smallish gain, and I think once they've got maybe their version 2 halo fairing on there, then I think that will be it for the year. And I don't think when we come to this time next year, if the halo is still on the cars with the same rules, then I don't think you'll find anyone run almost anything different at all, sort of going forwards, really, because you're just so limited.
I noticed Carlos Sainz said that when he was running in the wet, he was finding it difficult to judge the grip because the rain wasn't hitting his helmet, which I take it must be like a soft top car in the rain. Would that also work as like a positive for wet running? If the visor's not getting
reduce the spray
soaked with wet.
I mean, I'm a motorcyclist, and it can go both ways. If you haven't got so much spray going on your crash helmet, that's a good thing because you can see clearer. But equally, if you get a little bit of rain in your visor and there's not enough breeze hitting it, then the rain doesn't clear very much.
Yeah.
So I think there is somewhere in the middle that the drivers will want. But that is it is a factor. And I think it's just what the drivers will get used to, because you've not just got the halo, but you've got the little screen in front of the driver as well. Haas in particular have got something quite big and spiky and aggressive. Other teams, still just run a simple strip of perspex the front of the cockpit. So, there will be things that we maybe haven't quite considered with the halo that will crop up. But these are coming into sort of like the minutiae now, rather than, can the driver even get out of the car and all this sort of stuff that everyone was sort of very panicky about over the winter. But yeah, no one was talking about it after the first couple of days, and it was, they're there. I didn't even notice them after a while.
I know the internet's probably still going to explode about it over the first few races, but I don't think it's anywhere near as sort of like ugly as we thought it was going to be.
No, the ones that they were running last year were just 3D printed carbon fiber wrapped mock-ups. They didn't have the aerodynamic shaping. They didn't have the color scheme. They were pretty horrible looking bits of engineering anyway, to be honest. And I think we'll just get used to it. Maybe they'll tweak the rules around where you can blend some of the surfaces in around the cockpit. But for me, okay, I have to admit, I'm very much an advocate of the Halo because of the safety benefits. But equally, I like the aesthetics of F1 cars. I don't think it's so bad. But some of the reaction on the internet, which I guess is typical of the internet, has been so radical that I could mention something about a car and then someone would just respond on Twitter going, "Effing Halo!" It's like, I wasn't even talking about the Halo.
I'm almost convinced that people that talk about these things on the internet don't actually watch Formula One. I'm almost convinced of it.
Yeah, no. Let's be honest. It's not a beautiful thing, and it is a compromise in design. But if it can save a driver's life or save someone from a head injury, then I think that's where motorsport has got to go in the 21st century. We're not sending Romans out into the amphitheatre to be killed. We're there to see them survive big accidents. And Formula One is still dangerous. And as much as everyone thinks that big chunks of debris, drivers going into upside down, going into under tyre walls, tyres hitting the driver. Everyone said that now couldn't happen this year because of the change in the tether regulation. But, an hour into testing, I saw Alonso's the rear wheel going bobbing across the sand trap.
Yeah.
Stuff can still happen. And, drivers still can get hurt. This isn't 100% safe sport. It never will be. As soon as you start traveling at high speeds, we can't counter everything. But when you see that there has been a pattern of head injuries across motorsport for, quite a few years, then, front cockpit protection, the Halo is the first stab at it, and it won't be the final stab at it. It just has to be done.
It's always the that time when Grosjean went over the front of Alonso at Spa. It's just that is the reason to have a Halo.
Yeah, everyone was sort of saying, well, it wouldn't have saved Bianchi, and I think that's absolutely true. But yeah, as you say, there's been lots of other accidents that have caused injury, and there's even more that have been such near misses. I remember watching that, and I think Kimi and another driver had one at Austria a couple of years ago as well.
Fernando, I think,
it was Fernando, yeah.
And Formula E, I know it's kind of slightly off topic, but that first race when Heidfeld went inverted sideways into a barrier. That is absolutely the potential for Halo to save someone.
It was actually that crash that started this podcast.
It was.
Was it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned Formula E. I saw you were at the motor show the other week.
Yes, I ducked out of the first day of testing and went over to Geneva to see the car for myself.
Yeah. What did you think of it?
It looks better in real life than it did in those first images that they released. There was something very screwy about those first renders that they let out at the beginning of the year. There was actually one angle they showed you where the perspective was so wrong on the image that you could see the outside contact patch of the front and the rear tyre. And it just isn't. And the car is a lot lower. It's a lot more shapier. It's a lot wider, actually. And I don't think that's an aspect of it. I don't particularly like the width of the nose and everything, but it's a styling thing. Does it really matter? No, But no, the car looks great. And the performance of the car is shaping up to be quite something as well. It looks like it's going to be a fair big step forwards, particularly in qualifying when they really unleash the full 250 kilowatt engine. And I think it's a as we've seen with IndyCar, it's just showing that you can do interesting stuff with single seaters, and it doesn't have to be. We don't always have to stick to the closed cockpit, closed wheel. We're in the 21st century now. We don't have to be purist about everything.
Well, it does look like a car from a video game. Yeah, it looks like a racing car from the future when I look at
Yeah,
them.
exactly. Why shouldn't it? I mean, I've got young children, so I sort of spend time going around toy shops and that, and often it's for their benefit rather than mine. So I'll go and look at the Airfix aisle or the remote control car, and there's no Formula One cars there. I'm thinking when I grew up and I had metal toys of every Formula One car. I mean, most of my knowledge from teams
Same
came
here.
from the toy model.
Yeah.
And now there's nothing branded as a Formula One car. There's no Formula One style cars even there. It's all buggies or other types of cars. So it's like a Formula One car's not grabbing children's attention now. Race cars. In any FI category. Is that a good thing? I mean, God, you would never see, you would never even see an LMP1 car in a toy shop nowadays. That's not a good situation, is it? So if Formula E can have a car that is really exciting and we can potentially get kids interested in and maybe non-motorsport sport fans interested in, then I think that's a good thing.
That's something I've been banging on for ages, is the fact that
I would have gone for ever.
yeah. If you take a Formula One car from like 1997 and then a Formula One car from 2009, if you show them to someone that isn't like an avid Formula One fan, they're just going to look at it and go, well, it's a Formula One car, and then walk away.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. Motorsport is very inward looking, and it's not very good at breaking out from the people that have always watched it, and therefore you get the legacy that their children watch it, and so on and so forth. How do they get people interested? I think if you I did some drawings last year where I drew the silhouette of about a dozen different categories. And some of them are really hard to spot. And I imagine your average, as you say, the average member of the public wouldn't know the car that won Le Mans last year. They'd probably pick out, an Audi TT road car, or as a guess, maybe some kind of Porsche 911. They wouldn't point to the LMP1 car. They'd probably say it's a Formula One car. So I think there is something in the design and the marketing of motorsport that maybe isn't quite right out there at the moment.
So yeah, talking of which, you got screens on the LMP1 cars, and of course IndyCar are going with screens now.
Mm-hmm.
And so bringing it back around to the Formula One thing with the Halo, do you think the Halo is a half step towards being full canopied Formula One cars?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think what we will end up with for motorsport in general will be something more like the Red Bull Aero screen, which a lot of people probably maybe didn't quite understand when it was tested briefly. So it is a screen, much like the IndyCar screen, but it does have a carbon fiber structure around it. So it's a kind of hybrid IndyCar screen and a Halo at the same time. And the Halo really is only lacking, a screen to fill it in either side. And I think if you got the design of the screen right and the carbon fiber structure, you could really bring it back to something that looks almost much more like a kind of an old 70s Ferrari or M23 McLaren, where it just looks like a wraparound screen. You don't really appreciate the fact that it's got a big structure inside it. Certainly not that 54 millimeter tube that's going around on the Halo. But I think that's probably what they're looking to incorporate into the sort of the 2021 car spec that Ross Brawn's team's working on at the moment. So, I think it's inevitable. I mean, hopefully they'll bring it in a bit sooner, even if it's just, something a bit more ad hoc. But yeah, I mean, a screen is inevitable, isn't it, really? I mean, because that stops the Halo being a compromise and makes it to be much more of a complete solution. But I don't think, from speaking to the people at the FIA, like Laura Meekes and Charlie Whiting and some of the other people that work on this, I don't think we will ever go to a full canopy in F1, simply because it's not needed. The cars are going forwards far, far quicker than things will fall from the sky. So, it would be, an absolute freak of timing for someone to be, hit on the head by an object. They would either have to be at a standstill, and it fell that way. So it's, again, you can't counter every situation, but I think the Halo level of open cockpitness is here to stay.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Back to the teams.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Haas and where they look to be? Because weren't they sort of a couple of tenths behind Ferrari? Do you think that's like a real step forward?
Well, they were looking quite handy. I must say, again, the lack of running made it very hard to sort of judge everything, and I didn't get enough time out on track to really have a good look at them. They've certainly got a lot more pace in that car this year. And they looked like by the end of last year that they'd got their braking issues, under control. And this is their third year, so they've had, the second year is always difficult, isn't it? It's like being a band, the second album. So they've kind of lived and learned a bit. So I think it's very hard to pitch where they're going to end up, because we've kind of got so little history to base future judgments on, have we?
Yeah.
But when you have, maybe Williams, potentially even Force India, maybe not being the teams that we might have predicted, and if Haas are competitive, then they could have a good year. But it's so hard to know what to pick an order out for the midfield. But they look like they've made a step ahead. I mean, in design terms, as soon as I saw the car, it was clear that they had made quite a step with it. It wasn't just the kind of a warped over 2017 car. So I think that looks good for them. But it's just, the great thing this year is that the midfield is just going to be absolutely madly competitive. It's going to change as we go through the year. It's going to change between different racetracks. And I just hope that the TV kind of, stops looking at the top three teams and focuses on some of the midfield racing this year. So that should be exceptional.
It would be good to see, because you do. It's the nature of the beast where you get 1, 2, sometimes 3 teams that are miles ahead, but you can usually predict the order for the rest of the season. But it would be great to have a 6-way battle for 4th place.
Well, I think that is exactly where we are, to be honest. Sauber didn't look like they were having a great test. And as you say, they've got a very complicated car. If they can get their head around that, there's no reason they wouldn't be competitive as well. There's Williams didn't have a great test, and I'm no judge of drivers, but a lot of people are pointing at the drivers and saying, that maybe that's not a formula for a successful championship. But then Haas are picking up. McLaren looks like they're going to have a storming year. We know Force India can put race results together, particularly in the early part of this year. And while there's still lots to talk about the ownership and the funding of that team, if they do have the money to develop the car through the year, last year showed that they can do a good job of that, given the cash in the bank. So it would be madness to try and predict it, but let's not worry about predicting. Let's just sit back and watch it. It's going to be great.
Do you think it's a dangerous year for Williams, though, when you look at they're losing their title sponsor at the end of the year? They might not have the most competitive year. Are we in that sort of zone where we're in danger of losing Williams?
I don't know about losing them as a team. I to be honest, no, none of the midfield Formula One teams are, stable, solid. You could never think that they would. They may last all year, but I think Williams are in a position where their performance this year may not be at the level that they should be. They have kind of dropped back since 2014 when, they got lots right and lots of people got things wrong. And they've kind of drifted. You've got Paddy Lowe there now. And I don't know, you just sometimes get the feeling with Williams that, I know it's not the case when you speak, at an individual level, but it's almost like, we're kind of just happy with what we're doing. you don't get the feeling that they're like angry and really fighting to kind of get back on level pegging with sort of Ferrari and Red Bull, which is where they should be with their history and the level of people that they've got. So yeah, it is a particularly tricky time for them. I've got no doubt that they will come through this. I think their performance this year, I think, may well end up being much better than lots of us have kind of looked at and predicted on paper, and as testing may have sort of given us this suggestion. Because at the end of the day, they are a really good team, and they've got a great group of people there. But they do have to be careful that complacency and not really pushing throughout the year, and any issues will really be punished by dropping back to, as you say, potentially they could be the ninth team. I know lots of people that are confidently predicting that and thinking, that's where they'll be this year. I think they'll do better than that, but at the moment, I'm not getting the impression that they're going to be the ones fighting at the front of the midfield, consistently throughout the year.
Yeah.
We've seen it before with Williams, sort of going back to the Mechachrome days. And if there's one thing that team can do, it's bounce back.
Williams are a fantastic engineering business. I mean, that's what the business is. And the team is a different team now to the old days. You've got different people there. You've got Claire running the team now. You've got Paddy Lowe running the technical department. I'm not quite sure where things go on the commercial side of the team, but you've got some good people there. But I think
going by the press release I got today, most of the commercial departments are running the London Marathon this year.
Oh, right, okay. Well, that should be useful. I don't really quite know where to go with that one. But,
I was just wondering why they bothered sending out a
at
news
least they'll
story
get
on
some
it.
sponsorship.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. I think, in some respects, maybe a really bad year could be the impetus Williams need to bounce back. Because they haven't done a bad job over the past few years. They haven't done a good enough job, in my view. But it's certainly not been a bad years for any of them. But they have fallen behind Force India now, and maybe that kick up the backside that they need is a bit of a disaster of a season.
I think
which is horrible to say, but okay, that's kind of life, really, isn't it?
I think it might change their philosophy of driver lineups come next year. Because
I think that there's a lot about Williams. I think maybe needs to feel a bit of urgency. Not just the drivers, but I think there's other aspects of the management team that maybe need some different faces in there, and different levels of kind of let's just get on with it. So I think you're right. I think there does need to be a bit of a mood change at Williams.
Anyone got anything else?
Not really. No, I mean it's incredibly difficult to predict, as you say, Craig, about what's going to happen from the back all the way to the front. Sharp end looks like it's going to be the sharp end. Midfield, really, we don't know. For that reason alone, it's looking like it's going to be one of the most exciting years of Formula One in a long time. So it's definitely worth watching.
Even the back markers aren't guaranteed to be the same.
No, exactly. I mean, every team could score points. Where we've been looking, the last few seasons. Yeah. Who's going to score that one precious point to, get themselves a little bit further up the constructors table. But one thing that we sort of discussed quite a lot lately, Craig, is new eyes on Formula One. Trying to get new viewers in, and obviously Liberty are now in their all the guys from Liberty Media are now in their second year, is it now? Full ownership.
Well, it's going into their second season, isn't it?
Going into their second season. So, just from your perspective as a fan of the sport as well, as well as being completely involved, do you like the way they're going with trying to get trying to grow audiences and essentially grow Formula One into this global sort of super sport that it can be?
I mean, you can see there's good and bad in what you can see in their approach. In terms of what they're starting to do with TV, with social media. I saw Will Buxton doing an Instagram live from testing, which, as I understand, will start to happen at races as well, which is fantastic. That's the sort of, that sort of thing needs to be done. Formula One's been stuck in this kind of TV contract rut for for many years, but that was the model that built the sport up. And a few years ago, we all used to watch TV, didn't we?
Yeah.
And now we do a bit, but there's lots of other ways to consume sports. And I think the whole how they film the event, stuff that goes on the event, where that then gets where you can then consume that. Do you have to get a subscription to a pay TV channel? Do you get the OTT service that they're looking at, which you have to subscribe to, or would that be free to air, or should that just be on YouTube and free anyway? I think that area is starting to work well. I think the other area it's working well is, for the first time ever, as far as I understand, in Formula One, apart from a brief moment in 2009, they're actually getting engineers to look at what the rules are. Before, it seemed that we'd get lots of very clever people talk about the rules and then hand it over to someone and then the rules written were never checked.
Yeah.
Which is why we got the T-Wings last year. It was literally someone didn't read through the rules and went, that's not right. And I'm one of those geeks that does read the rule book very closely and try and second guess what people's interpretations of things are. And as we spoke about earlier about the oil burn, you can see that there's gaping holes in those regulations. And even with the halo, I don't think the halo should have winglets on, but the regulations just didn't even think about covering that off. But now you've actually got Ross Brawn, you've got Jason Somerville, you've got all of the. He's literally got a Formula One team working for FOM, designing cars, wind tunnel testing. I'm sure they'll get to track testing their ideas. So we're actually going to have a proper set of validated rules that will deliver what we wanted from them. And I think that is a great step. But I think there's still a long way to go with everything in Formula One. It's still very backwards as a sport in the media, how they operate at circuits, where they're making their money from. I don't know the answer to where they should make the money from. I don't think TV and circuits are the right place to do that, because, I'm lucky I get to go to races. I get a free meet. But I know that, lots of fans and lots of people pay a lot of money to go and sit and get a very bad, view, very poor quality product from the event. A lot of people pay a lot of money for their TV subscriptions and don't get very much from the event. That's not the way to do things. I think it's almost like the product should be free, but maybe advertised in a different way. Maybe make their money from partnerships, from maybe smaller subscription services, rather than people paying quite a bit of money a year for all of this. But you've got to kind of got to give these guys time, and they're going to make some mistakes. They've done some quick wins already, as we saw last year. And if they do open it up, Formula One, it is a great and exciting sport. If they get the cars right, if they get the how it looks on screen right, then it should absolutely be one of the biggest grossing sports for the fans in the world. Outside of your classic sort of bat and ball sports that I've been interested in.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because the people that you get, your eyes on the sport, they're the people who are going to be the next Kimi Raikkonens. They're going to the next Craig Scarboroughs. People who get into engineering and then become fans of Formula One.
There's lots out there, but what we don't want for them to do is to try and make it purely into an entertainment, simple sport, because Formula One, it is a car and a driver. If you got to remember that these the cars do have to be a factor, and it can't be GP2, it can't be F2, it can't be everyone's got an equal car, because that's again not part of the this mystical DNA of what everyone thinks Formula One is. I don't think the cars have to be massively complicated. I think the aero at the moment is ridiculous, and I think there's still a sweet spot to find with the power units, which I'm not quite sure where they're going to be going with that rules. But it does need to be a technical sport, because that's what it's always been. It's always been at the cutting edge technology, even if that technology was simply bolting the engine to the chassis rather than having a chassis wrap around it and using aircraft style technology. that sort of stuff. And it needs to, the technical side, both with the cars and with how the sport's presented on screen, is how, the sort of the younger generation want the sport to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all suddenly experts on mobile phones, and we'll all talk about 4G, 5G, and megapixel cameras, and all. Suddenly getting used to all these apps that can, not just take pictures, but measure distances from things and stuff. So, there needs to be a strong technical element to how it's portrayed and how people receive it. So, I'm glad I'm not in Liberty, because it's a huge job they've got. It's it's a thankless task.
It is absolutely.
If they get it right, it's like, well, it's what we've done all along. And if they get it wrong, they're going to get lambasted for it. But we'll keep an eye on it.
But it's what I've been saying for a while. They're trying to bring Formula One up to date, up to 2018, from where it's been. Which, to be honest, things have been fairly stagnant for a few years. But they're having to do 20 years worth of growth in 2 years.
Yeah. Exactly. And with the old cost model as well, which is obviously they've found has been one of their biggest issues. They suddenly realise we're not bringing the money in like we thought we were, and all our changes are going to undermine that. Which was something that Bernie was very good at. He knew how to keep the revenues going, even if it was sometimes the kind of the detriment of the sport. But the money was always rolling through. So we're also very critical of him. But he has kind of kept this whole show going. When potentially it could have died away many years ago.
What did you think of Bernie saying that Formula One should look at making the switch to electric?
Oh, okay. Should I just go for the juggler and get the haters out straight away?
Yeah, go for it.
He's right. No, he's right.
God, I just heard the internet crack.
Yeah.
Boom! There it goes.
Whether he was saying that from cat amongst the pigeons, or whether he genuinely believes that, I think it's probably the former. But it's kind of right. But when we start to talk about timescales, by the time we reach 2040, you probably won't be able to buy petrol and diesel road cars. Probably diesel road cars will probably have died out even before that. So again, with everything you've been speaking about with Liberty and what's good and what's bad, I think everything that's lacking at the moment is what is F1. And I did some tweet sort of questionnaires over this last year. What for you is the DNA of Formula One? And everyone gave you a different answer. And some people are quite specific and very granular. It's got to have an open cockpit, open wheels. Is that really important? Or it's got to have cutting edge technology, or it's got to have accessible. There's lots of things of what Formula One should be. But if people want to say, well, Formula One must always have a petrol engine, then you're kind of consigning it to the kind of the pickle jar of history, aren't you? People will still be interested in watching Formula One cars race, but it's going to be very hard to find places where you can race them, people that will fund the racing, people will there'll always be someone that will make the engine, but maybe they can't pay for it. So, will you have the manufacturers interested in is our manufacturers what we want in the sport? There's lots of kind of questions around it. But I think if you restrict Formula One to always being a petrol series, then you are kind of, giving it a finite lifetime. It will just become a kind of a sideshow, maybe a bit of a heritage series.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's really what the DNA of Formula One is. I think Formula One has always been about cutting edge. They were steel tube cars, then they became aluminium cars, then became carbon fiber cars. Well, what would be next? 3D printed. So I think we have to be a bit more open-minded about the powertrain. And, however the electric is produced, I think Formula One needs to move towards electric final drive. So that could mean hydrogen fuel cells. It could mean batteries. It could mean, kind of induction charging from under the track along the straight into smaller batteries, or, solid state batteries, or even supercapacitors. Or maybe you do keep your petrol engine, but you just use it as a generator to create electric to power the motors that are driving the rear wheels. It's, I think that kind of question needs to be raised now, because to get that technology ready for 2030, 2040, it's going to take that long. And
Yeah.
we're only now starting to firm up what's going to happen in 2021. So, Formula One does need a kind of a roadmap going forwards, or else it could find itself not caught out by Formula E, because I don't think Formula E's aim is to overtake Formula One in terms of performance or TV viewing figures. It's kind of got its own little niche, hasn't it, in terms of getting that message of EVs out there. But I think the FAA. I mean, I spoke to Jean Todt, and it's like, what other categories are going to go electric? And he was very ambivalent about the answer. And it's like, well, we talk about all the things, and he didn't really give me an answer at all. But I think motorsport needs to be relevant to the rest of the world. I mean, I don't mean road relevant. I don't mean it needs to be 100% sustainable, clean, green. But if people aren't buying petrol cars, and if people start to see petrol cars as a negative thing, like kind of speeding and drink driving, and diesels have suddenly become, then Formula One will it will cease to exist. So I think that, but Bernie was kind of right, but probably not what he was. I don't think that's what he was trying to do.
Do you think Formula E might end up helping Formula One in the way that when Formula One wants to make that switch to go there, Formula E's kind of done all the beta testing for it?
Well, to be honest, I mean, in lots of respects, Formula E kind of can become a bit of a beta test for lots of things, isn't it? If you think of how they've shaped the cars, how they've got the technology, where they race, the sort of the message they put out, how they make everything accessible online. Formula One, in terms of social media, just hasn't existed, but Formula E is kind of built around social media. You can watch the races live on YouTube in certain countries, and I think lots of the things that Formula E has done across the board, including some of the technology, should feed back into other categories, including Formula One. Maybe we need to have F2 become electric at some stage first, or F3, whatever it's going to be called now, isn't it? Maybe there needs to be an electric category at Grand Prix races, just to get the technology moving, get the technology seen out there at a racetrack at that level of audience. Because Formula E's aim has always been to be in the city centre, short one-day format, trying to attract non-motor racing people, which is why motor racing people don't really like Formula E, because they've made no attempt to kind of aim it at your purist classic fan. In fairness, lots of people have kind of taken it on board and really liked it, but equally lots of people seem to hate it with a passion, simply because it's electric, which is an interesting point of view, but that's again, that's the way the world is sometimes. So I mean, I think Formula E has done a great job, and I hope Liberty and the FIA do take notice of some of the stuff that they've done. And as we go towards electric, there's there is technology that's going to be proven on those cars that will be absolutely relevant to Formula One cars, as they're equally massively relevant to the EVs that we're all going to be end up driving somehow or another in sort of 10, 20 years.
That is great. Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Craig.
No, it's fascinating. It's been great talking.
Yeah, it's great of you to take the time to join a bunch of amateurs like us.
At the end of the day, we're all amateurs, believe me.
Some are more amateur than others. But no, thanks very much for coming on, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon.
No, during the season, let's definitely have another catch-up. Thoroughly enjoyable.
amazing.
Thanks very
Absolutely.
much.
That'd
We'd
be
love to
great.
have you back on again.
Thanks a lot. Massive thanks to Craig Scarborough for that, in all seriousness. That was incredibly insightful, and what a genuinely nice guy.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Incredibly insightful.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we were chatting with him at the Mercedes launch. Oh, sorry, I've just dropped something. Oh, yeah, it was a name.
Pick up that event name you just dropped.
Shall we move on with some news?
Yeah, do that.
What have we got? The one thing that we didn't talk about in testing, Mercedes did 75% of a season, as it turns out.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Somewhere between 70 and 75%, depending on what you call a season. Incredible. We just spoke about it then with Craig, but incredible reliability. I mean, are Mercedes worried about reliability because they did that much running during a preseason test? It's just apart from that first day that Dan's already alluded to,
It feels like they did less than in the previous
they were
years.
hitting like 150 laps plus most days, which is just crazy. Of
Let's
course,
not forget they didn't break their drivers though, like they have
No.
in the past.
yeah, they learned, didn't they, from previous years and split them over the 2 days. But yeah, I mean, it's astounding, and as we've just been talking about with Craig, there, I'm really looking forward to 2018 because it just so many unknowns being thrown up in the air. One of them being that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to have more of a preview of the season and the first race next week.
Should we get a guest on for that as well?
Hang on. Yep, Sean says he'll do it. We've got Sean Kelly on next week.
Well, there you go.
We're not
Virtual
doing-
Statman back
we're
on
not
the
doing
show.
bad for guests this year, are we?
No, we're doing okay. So hang on a second. Let's
Not
just
doing bad for guests or holidays.
hang on. Roll of honour for this season. Then, well, after next week's show,
Not even this season. This pre-season.
this pre-season. So we'll have Sean on next week.
Yep.
We've just had Scarbs.
Yep.
Craig Scarborough. Toto Wolf.
Was on the show.
The actual, not
The
just
ac-
you
the
doing
actual-
your impression.
Of Arnold
That,
Schwarzenegger.
that he thinks he's good.
Valtteri Bottas.
Yep.
Lewis Hamilton.
Yes.
George Russell. Lando Norris.
George Russell, Lee's driver-in-law.
And Lando Norris. Don't
And
forget
Lando
Lando,
Norris.
of course. Doing all right.
How the hell are we managing this?
Drugs. We're drugging people.
And where do we go from there? I'll tell you where we go from there. Tatiana Calderon announced last week as the Sauber test driver.
Yeah, just after we had that conversation about how stupid Carmen Jordan was for saying about Formula One being
Too hard for women?
too hard for women, and that a woman will make it to Formula One, but it should definitely be on merit rather than the fact that she's just a woman.
Although, in Carmen George's defence, she has issued a statement clarifying that she was asked directly a question by a journalist: which do you find easier, Formula E or Formula One? To which she said, Formula E, because it's less physical.
It was a bit of a translation error.
Bit of a translation
Bit
error.
of sensationalism.
Bit of sensationalism.
However,
That's easy for you to say.
However,
Jinx.
However, when she clarified her comment after the initial point, she did kind of make it a bit worse to start
Yeah.
with. So yeah, Tatiana Calderon being put in as a development driver at Sauber.
Well, it's actually test and development driver, and she did say that she does expect to drive the car at some point this season.
Okay.
I'd
Now,
like to
now
bloody
whether-
hope so, if that's a role.
Whether that's in the mid-season test after Hungary or at the end of the season for the, what do we call it, rookie tyre, young driver test in Abu Dhabi. But she does expect to actually drive the Sauber.
No, but Lee gave us all a rundown
Yeah.
of her results in motorsport history, and she's had one victory
One victory
in the Florida Winter Series.
Yeah, and a third. I can't remember. It's not. It's all I'm going to say is it did not read like the resume of a future Formula One driver.
Although quite often test and development drivers are not particularly racers.
No, but they generally have like a pretty well-rounded history of other motorsports,
Yeah.
which they've done quite well in.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to have a look at it. But I think Carmen was essentially more successful when she joined Renault. Or
Possibly,
Lotus.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. So yeah, that came out. It was the day after the Carmen Jordan gate.
15th. I think her highest finish in F3
GP3 is it?
GP3
Yeah.
was 15th.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, talking of which, the FIA have finally announced that GP3 is to become F3, and they made that a big news story over the weekend. I thought that had already been announced.
It was being touted, wasn't it, that the GP3 was to become F3 and merge with the European
Formula 3.
Championship,
It's going to follow Formula 1 as well now, isn't it?
as well as F2.
Yeah.
Yes, but they're I don't know how far they're going with it because F2 doesn't go to every Formula 1
No,
race.
it's not going to go to every Formula 1 race, but it's the European Formula 3 obviously didn't follow Formula 1 around, whereas the new Formula 3
Will.
I think.
Okay.
I'm just looking for the story from this week, and all I'm finding is the ones from last September when it was
Kind of announced.
announced before. Where's the... There we go. Formula One's promote new F3 series in 2019.
I do hope that Formula GP3 and F3 and F2 now can become the Moto 3 and Moto 2 of Formula 1.
I think that's now what they're aiming for, because MotoGP have proved that really does work.
Yeah.
Especially when you brand it like that as well.
Yeah, although you do get a lot more movement up the ladder from the feeder series into the top flight.
I think it's going to help as well because we heard from Lando himself about how McLaren feel about him and what they want from him in the future. Toto even going as far as talking about him during the press conference. Toto talking about George Russell in the press conference at Mercedes. That I think if you can have some people that are doing well in GP2 that the teams are pretty keen on, rather than. I hate to pick on Jolyon Palmer again, but we need people that are coming through the sport to be real deal Formula One drivers, that are winning the championships, because that's going to spice for GP2 up. It's going to make people watch it because they're going to watch for the stars of the future. At the minute, it hasn't felt like that for a while. I think it feels more like that this year.
Perhaps, yeah.
All being well, it would be good to see an actual natural progression up the ranks.
Although just pointing out, I don't know if anybody spotted the Formula 2 testing that they actually got done when it was dry. Mm-hmm. George Russell, P1.
Yeah.
So
Go on,
you want the real, you want the real deal. You could be looking at him if you're looking at George Russell.
And of course, everyone was starting with a complete level playing field this year because the F2 car is brand new.
Yeah.
I think Lando was fastest in all the other one, wasn't he? Apart from the last day.
Last day, George Russell was fastest.
Yeah.
I think F2 is going to be great this season.
Look forward to it. I think for a personal note, I always need an interest in it, and I quite like Lando and I quite like George. So it's there's an interest there for me to watch it.
You've chosen your friends and you've chosen your family.
I have, yeah.
I was going to say
that's. You can't choose your family, but Lee definitely has.
It's when he stops choosing his friends we need to start worrying.
Yeah,
that cellar's getting very full. What was I going to say? Oh yeah,
that reminds me.
Viewers in just about every country apart from the UK and Australia will be able to watch F2 and this season's GP3 on the new Formula 1 digital streaming service. So that should raise a lot of interest in it worldwide as well, because I know the races weren't carried by as many broadcasters. I've been saying as much as we pay for it, we're lucky in the UK that Sky's F1 channel does show the support races, even if it means occasionally we've got to sit through the Porsche Super Cup. Good luck to anyone watching that for the first time. Rich men sticking cars in walls.
Yeah.
But
and have B Sky B slowly make love to us for doing it.
Watching rich men stick cars in walls, which is what Formula 1 always used to be.
Rich men sticking cars in walls could be a series on Netflix, couldn't it?
I think it's more of a Dave thing, isn't it?
No. It's a feature on the James Corden show. That way, nobody has to watch it.
That's the second podcast I've done in a week, which has had to reference James Corden.
May that never happen again.
I referred to him on Must See Audio that we recorded on Friday, which you can go and download.
That's the 8th podcast in a row where he's referenced Must See Audio.
I
can't believe you're keeping count.
I'm not. What do you think that chart is on the wall behind him?
I referred to him as the plug-in cunt. Just for all of the shit TV shows, he's just like the plug-in cunt that you need.
Mate of mine described him as Mount Cunty Monjaro.
I can't remember who did it. So just before we carry on, there was someone tweeted up a picture of the guys from doing League of Their Own, and I can't remember who it was that replied to it. I think it was who's your is he Scottish stand-up comedian?
Frankie Baldwin. You told the story last week.
Did I?
Yes.
All right, carry on.
Might have been on the Patreon. I'm not entirely sure. Sad news to report now, I'm afraid. Motorsport lost one of the most passionate and knowledgeable and enthusiastic journalists this week. Henry Hope Frost was sadly killed in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah.
He was the face and the voice of the Goodwood Festival of Speed, amongst a lot of other things.
Yeah, if you've ever been to Goodwood and you've heard the cars being announced going up the hill, most likely Henry Hope Frost.
Yeah. We just want to pass on our condolences to his family and
a man very, very closely tied to close ties to every sort of form of motorsport.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's why if you're seeing the hashtag fever cropping up, that's in tribute to Henry.
yeah.
I think we need to talk about something happier now. Pick up a guitar.
Okay, it's buried, so give me a minute.
Oh, it's behind a pair of tripods. I'm just going to fill in for time here. I'm not banned this week, am I?
No, you're not. You're back on the grid.
I'm back on the grid and I'm actually taking part rather than running it.
Yeah,
That makes a change.
because the only thing banning you from for a total shunt did was let all the people know that my knowledge of Formula One post me or pre me is not very good.
Pre you,
Yeah.
but some of the questions were about things that had happened after you were born.
Yeah, but he wasn't.
Dedicating this week's Total Shunt theme tune to Rob Santos for his kind messages saying that he always loves the Total Shunt theme tune. And no, I'm not going to tune it.
When was the last time that guitar got tuned?
You know who we talk about pre me?
Total Shunt, Total Shunt. Everybody, time for Total Shunt. Good job, Craig Scarborough's not on the show right now, because if he was, he'd probably guess it after the first one. Look out, here comes a Total Shunt.
I've just had an email from Sean Kelly and he's already submitted his first guess for next week's. And he got it right.
It's getting to the point now where that guitar's so out of tune, it sounds like you're doing something clever tuning wise.
Next week, I join the Mars Volta.
Was it Lou Reed that had a guitar where every string was tuned to the same note?
Really?
Yeah.
Fair
Awesome.
enough.
Right. This week's is brought to us by Rob Higgins.
Hi, Rob.
And he's dead lucky because it's dead late because we've been doing extra stuff. And this is the first one that was at the top, and he only submitted it an hour ago. So he sneakily snuck in because I can't be bothered rooting through them.
See, there are people there who sent those in 6 weeks ago going, when's he going to use mine?
There's people there that have sent them in 3.5 years ago.
Oh, well, they've been doing this for 3 years.
That's how advanced Sean Kelly is.
Still got it right as well.
If you have sent me one that I haven't done, that you sent me ages ago, just put another little note on the bottom of the message you sent to me, because then it'll ping right back up to the top.
Like a bump on an old forum.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go.
I was born
Yay!
in 1928.
So Lee obviously doesn't know the answer because it's pre-him,
1928.
90 years ago.
Which we'll now refer to as BL.
Before Lee.
Okay, so we're looking for somebody who's 90 this year, who would be 90 this year.
Anno Domini.
Ah, very good.
In the year of our lead.
I started repairing both bicycles before moving on to motor vehicles. I'm going to put my glasses on.
I think that's wise.
Okay.
Repairing bicycles was probably about the only thing you could do in the 30s. There weren't that many motor vehicles around.
It could be Bicycle Repairman from Monty Python.
I started as a vet before moving on to vehicles.
Yeah. There were more dogs back then.
Yeah.
I focused on my chosen career against my father's wish. There's maybe multiple wishes, maybe one wish. Who knows?
Sounds like Murray Walker again.
I would like a guess.
We're looking at someone who would have been racing in the 50s, aren't we?
Yeah. Should we say Fangio and have done with it early?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I competed in the 1955 West African Rally.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
My first single-seater event was at Brands Hatch in 1961.
So not Fangio. Also would have been like 33 for a first single seater event.
Yeah. I think we've got another clue before we have to do a guess, haven't we?
Meeting Bernie Ecclestone was integral to the start of my F1 career. I don't want to guess.
God. And Bernie used to run the Brabham team, so could it be Jack Brabham who started the team and then Bernie took it over off him?
Maybe. Jack Brabham's the only kind of thing we've got at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
He was a driver before a team owner, wasn't he? So meeting Bernie Ecclestone wouldn't have been integral to his success there.
And Bernie did enter 3 Grand Prix. I think he raced at Monaco was one of them.
He didn't qualify.
No, true. We really could have done with this one next week.
Yes. Oh. Nothing that's been said so far suggests that this person was a Formula One racer.
That is true.
Meeting Bernie Ecclestone.
Was key to his Formula One success.
Yeah.
So it could be someone who ended up employed by Brabham.
Or
How old's Max Mosley? He can't be 90.
no, I wouldn't have thought so.
You
And
need,
probably wouldn't have gone to West Africa, allegedly.
That's one of my jokes, Dan. Well done, sir.
Curveball.
we don't need,
Do we need to play Jacques over that?
no. We don't need to guess on this one either, so you can give us another clue.
That's tremendous. The 1978 Swedish Grand Prix was my first Formula One weekend.
1970, he was 50.
Yes, so it wasn't someone who was a Formula One driver.
No. So it's going to be someone who... Can't be Murray Walker again.
No, I know the answer and I've forgotten his name. The doctor.
Sid
Sid
Watkins.
Watkins. Sid Watkins. Oh, yes, I like that. That is, yeah.
Oh, he was a failed racing driver, wasn't he? Who decided he was going to stick around in the sport after he failed to become a successful racing driver.
I think you'll find the doctor was David Tennant, but there we go.
The doctor has been many people. William Hartnell.
Tom Baker for me.
I'm sticking with Professor Sid Watkins.
Is that are
He's
you
my
locking that
doctor.
in as a guess?
Well, we've still
got one more question.
Got one more.
To his credit, if I said jump, Bernie normally said how high.
That doesn't change my thinking.
No, because one of his fitness tests was to make people jump off walls to see if their legs could withstand the landing. Because I
Which
remember,
is exactly what he did with Schumacher.
and Zonta as well.
And Nigel Mansell as well, but he'd actually broken something when he had to do it, hadn't he?
No, Schumacher, 6 weeks after he'd broken his leg, he had to jump off the pit wall. You know, when he broke his leg when you were at Silverstone,
Yeah.
he had to jump off the pit wall to prove to Sid Watkins that you could go racing again.
Yeah, well, he had to do it without screaming.
Yeah.
And unless literally pretty much anything that Sid Watkins said,
Got
Bernie
done.
implemented.
I think we should lock that one in.
I have been praised with improving the medical facilities
Yes,
at
Dan.
motorsport events.
Dan, go for it.
Are you Professor Sid Watkins?
I am Professor Sid Watkins. The Spaffer clue was I asked Ayrton Senna to retire and come fishing with me the day before he died.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
That's a brilliant
That
one.
was a really good one.
That was one of the reasons why it skipped the queue, actually, because I read it this afternoon and thought, that's good, I like that.
So thank you for sending that in. If you want to send a total shunt in, if you haven't done already, then send it as a direct message straight to Lee on Twitter.
At a total shunt.
And you can get the rest of us at 3 Legs 4 Wheels, or
At Flood21.
At _Dan_.
he's learned.
He
He's
has,
learned. And
yeah.
at Pablo100. Right, Formula Lee, the last race of the Winter Series.
Oops, forgot to do it.
Me too.
I thought I'm going to do it with old driver aids off, and because I'd already set a time from last August, which didn't count.
How did that work for you?
That's why I've not got a time this week.
Am I the best out of the four of us? I thought I was behind you in the standings.
Yeah, you were behind me in the standings, but if you looked at my time, it said August, the day that the game came out last year.
Default, the best two words in the English language.
I'm the best, and you will all remember it.
Because it doesn't happen often. 37 entries in total this week. Dan, you were the best out of the four of us. 122, 197.
Was that good enough for 37th?
It was good enough for 31st.
Well, hey.
Get in.
But you're not eligible to go in the draw.
No.
The entries for the draw this
I'd
week.
put you in a draw.
Yeah, but then you'd lock it and hide the key. The one, is it the one in the cellar again?
It's my people draw.
It is the one in the cellar again. The top 20 this week. All getting an entry into the prize draw, which we are going to do on the show next week.
Yep.
For the Nico Rosberg 2016 helmet from our friends at CM Helmets.
Yeah, go visit them at cmhelmets.com and have a look at the amazing range of helmets they've got. Replica helmets and Formula One drivers, IndyCar drivers. They come in all sorts of sizes. Probably best as a display piece. I wouldn't go
Wouldn't
wearing it
recommend
to
wearing
your
that.
local karting track or anything like that. But yeah, go and give them a look, and thanks very much to Bet at CM Helmets for getting the opportunity for the helmet.
Yeah, I think I've worked out how we're going to choose the draw. I'm going to get all the entries for the draw. Everyone that's finished in the top 20
And
during the
randomise
season. Randomise them, put them into a random order. Give everyone a number, 1 to however many. We'll get Sean to pick the number next week.
Yeah, why not?
Cool.
He likes numbers.
He does. That's why I thought he's the best one to pick it. But the ones, the 20 this week are in 20th place, Ian Beraz. 19th, Ben Raguska. 18th was some great names going on here. Daniel Lendval. I can't even see. 17th, Ruben Hernandez.
You need Lee's glasses.
Are you short-sighted or long-sighted?
Long things away.
I need to wear your glasses the other way around then.
Right.
Where did I got to? 16th was Lee Webster. 15th, Charlie Jefferson. 14th, Ashley Woodhouse. 13th, Zach Vasson. 12th, Nicholas Carline. 11th, Barnaby Lee. Top 10. 10th place, Mike Camping. 9th, Pete Bull. 8th was Reese Hyde. 7th, Travis Parker. 6th, Ollie Vestley. 5th, Max Williams. 4th, Jeff Sharp. Top 3 with the times.
Good effort.
3rd place, Simon Joy, 119.444. 2nd place, I think he needs to win the award for most improved driver, Bradley Chambers.
Well done, Bradley. Good effort.
119.161. And do I really need to say who's won it again? Will Coates.
Yeah.
119.075. Well, we've got a request for the regular season. Share your setups, mate. So you will all get an entry into the draw next week, and Sean will be the one to, all being well, pick the lucky winner out.
Yes, and which means, is it Formula Lee Summer Series?
So we are now into the 2018 Formula Lee season.
So it's proper times.
Which means it's going to be in Melbourne in a current car.
Well,
In
in a
In a
2017 car.
in a game. Yeah. What in the game says current cars?
Well, let's go for a Mercedes then, with it being the first one,
Yep.
and in the dry.
Oh, thank you for that. So that is Melbourne in the dry, in the Mercedes. You have until the 26th of March, which is the Monday after the race.
Yep.
7 o'clock UK time, 2 o'clock Eastern time USA. Google whatever time zone you're in the world.
Yeah.
Based on those. You can do that.
I think people might have to start just send them pictures and won't they have the screenshots? It's going to be easier because lots of the times they'll probably already set a time for Australia.
Yeah, if you set a faster time than the one that's already on there and you're on the PlayStation and you're on my friends list, send me a friend request at Pabstar if you're on PS4. I always check the dates on them anyway.
Yeah,
because it's got the date that the time was set. But send the pictures in. You can send them by direct message on Twitter. You can send them via email, 3legs4wheels@gmail.com. You can do it as a direct message on Facebook. A couple of people have been sending them in on Instagram. Can I ask that you don't send them in on Instagram direct messages because you can't zoom in on the photos? So for who was it? I think it was Ben Southgate who sent it in. I had to put my glasses on and squint and look at the phone from about half an inch away, literally on the end of my nose, just to be able to see the time. So don't send them in on Instagram direct message. Email, Twitter or Facebook message preferably.
There's enough social medias not to have to use Instagram.
Yeah, plus it always gets confused with pictures of food because that's what most people use Instagram for.
Yes, this is true. Or boobs. A lot of boobs.
I know. No, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. Thanks again to Craig Scarborough for this.
Well, I'm a massive tit and I'm on Instagram now. Speaking of tits, what have you got there?
Nico Rosberg.
I think you'll find that was actually Jacques Villeneuve.
Oh, fair enough.
Thanks again to Craig Scarborough for coming on the show tonight. Great to have you on, and hopefully we'll be speaking to him again during the season and see how right or wrong we've all been. I get the feeling he's going to be more right than we were.
We kind of all sort of agreed, aren't we?
That doesn't bode well for his career now moving forward.
I didn't think of that.
We will be back next week with the preview of the Australian Grand Prix.
Well, hey.
It's been a long off-season, but we're nearly there. One more week. Hold it together.
Season preview-ish
And
thing.
a sort of season preview.
Yeah.
Like I said before, we will have Sean Kelly with us as well. So
It's always a good show when Sean's on.
it is.
Yeah.
And that means we've got to do less work on Who's a Total Shunt.
Yes, because Sean will just get it.
Actually, there's a challenge for everyone that wants to send in a Total Shunt for next week. Make it as hard as you can. Let's really put Sean to the test.
Yeah, proper obscure. I mean, I'm thinking American series, like some obscure American series might be the way forward.
I tell you, you'd probably get those as well.
Drag racing. Nobody watches drag racing.
Oh, there's one American family in drag racing. They either win or crash. Somebody whose name I can't recall sent me links to a load of YouTube videos, and it's either them breaking the land speed record or them breaking the car in half at 350 miles an hour.
Their wife-mother system must be terrified.
On that note, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.